Hello, welcome everybody to this year's Power Rankings of the CGT. We are here, what do I say with we? It's me and cbmarcus. We're here to do the Power Rankings for you guys, show you the teams, talk about a lot of funny things, and have a great time. So, without letting CB wait any longer, he can introduce himself. CB, what's good?
What is good? It's cbmarcus, officially the 25th ranked CGT Commissioner's Poll player. Joined with me is Lucas, who you played in CGT, so you've played a lot of these coaches in one
I
of the
played a
highest
lot of these
competitive
coaches,
leagues. So a lot of fun here. We got I would say two experienced coaches in Galar Dex Wi-Fi. Even though I've only been a part of two leagues in general, I've placed pretty highly.
It doesn't matter, you're like part of all the front office in the world.
Yeah, yeah, that
You have
too.
the experience if anyone got that.
Yeah, well, I'm the mock man. But with that being said, let's talk a little bit about the tiering. So basically, it is power rankings, so it is like a traditional 1 through 16. That being said, the order doesn't really matter. We basically have divided these coaches into 5 different groups, 5 separate categories, which each stand out to us in unique aspects. So there will be like a last place coach. That being said, you know, the difference between 16-15 is not as bad as, you know, like 15-14, where maybe there's a split in the categories and there's a new break in the quality of the teams, according to us. As always, we are just basically putting our own projections onto these teams. You know, we're putting our own thoughts, we're putting our own play styles and our own ideas onto teams that aren't ours. So, you know, they're not always going to be accurate. A lot of coaches, you know, especially a coach pool as talented as this, you know, they're all going to have diverse ideas and new ways to team build and implement these teams into their game plans. So, you know, for us to be here and ranking them, it's not going to be anything like permanent, you know, like it's just us. Like these people are in CGT for a reason. So they all got really cool ideas. They all got pretty interesting teams. With that being said, let's get on into the first category.
Alright, the first category. The ominous categories you're going to hear over the ground, as CB already said, are going to be like what we think that can be done to a team or what we think about the category of teams, because it's hard to rank every team specifically because this is very high. I want to say ELO, but it's a really high standards here, so we kind of had to go with categories that kind of bundle some of those teams, otherwise we would sit here for hours or days even. So,
Agreed.
with the first category, we have teams that probably need a little bit of trading to be viable, but still look phenomenal on paper. So, CB, want to start off with our first coach being Rhino 5311.
All right, and the first coach that we have up is, of course, Rhino 311 or 5311, coach of the Delaware Dittos. He has a very interesting team, and most importantly, he's a very talented coach. He actually did win EWT, a league that I was in just last week. So congrats to him. This team, what's up?
Spoilers.
Spoilers? No, the videos just got posted yesterday or something.
Oh, okay,
like that.
okay.
It's fine.
We're fine here.
Anyways, he's got some really interesting front pieces in the Kyurem, the Melmetal, the Slowking, and the Togekiss. These are all mons that can really switch into each other's weaknesses pretty efficiently. And 2 of the 4 can land some really nasty hits, while the other 2 can kind of just status and be general nuisances to the rest of the competition. That being said, I think where the team lacks is pretty obvious, and it's pretty immediate for anybody who's looking. There is one ground type, and that is Rhyhorn. You know, obviously you don't have to like stack ground types or anything, but Rhyhorn being your primary ground type means that electric types can go absolutely nuts. As you could tell, you know, 3 of the top 4 don't really like electric. Obviously, the Slowking and the Togekiss struggle with it defensively. The Melmetal, you know, doesn't necessarily struggle with it defensively, but it's having a harder time to break. The Kyurem can maybe take some of that pressure off, and the Como being more of a win con. That being said, I'm not too sure on whether or not it will be able to really rise up to the competition if there's like a volt switching, Rotom Heat or Rotom Mow or Rotom Wash. So a lot of these mons will probably be able to get some damage off, volt switch out without any punishment whatsoever. So that's what I really worry about. That being said, Lucas, we did come up with a couple trades because, again, this is the category where we did think that these coaches need a few trades in order to have a really viable team. So, Lucas, what did we come up with for our trades?
So for this team specifically, like CB already said, we kind of thought he maybe needs a better ground type. And we looked at what was available, obviously, and we found a ground type that could be fitting if you would be willing to like drop your Como, drop a little bit out of your components of the team, and then just go a completely different route, I would say. And that how a ground type would be Hippowdon. What Hippowdon does for him is A, give him reliable hazards that's set up. It gives him a great defensive wall. It gives him the ground typing, obviously. And it gives him sand. And with this sand, he can pick up another typing that is right now getting used by the Colossal slot, but it could be a Lycanroc midday, because that is still available. And this thing in sand, being the fastest thing on the field most of the times, being able to control the speed perfectly well, is able to set up sweeps, is able to end games pretty quick. We saw that before. Some top tier coaches have used this thing. And I just think that it would be fitting to this team. Obviously there are like little other traits we would suggest, like getting a Blaziken. You can fit a Blaziken on a team. That gives you the missing now fire type. And all you really need to do is drop that Zorak, drop that Rhyhorn, drop that Colossal, and drop that Como. And you should be golden with that team.
I completely agree. And something else that's really important to note is that Rhino actually plays two other sand teams. He plays against Jack and the, I think it's the Vancouver Titans. And then he also plays against Badass Frostlass, coach of the Indiana Tracers. So there's a couple of different options that you can have with fitting Lycanroc midday onto your team, making it the fastest Pokemon, just bring it as a countermeasure to sand. But then you also have something like Blaziken, access to Vacuum Wave. Special Blaziken, I think is pretty slept on. I've slept on it in the past, and I've been punished for it. So a lot of different options with a team like that. And you also get a Pokemon that can put a dent in teams in Blaziken, and then also U-turn into the fat. So I think with these three traits in mind, I think Rhino has a lot of potential. And right off the bat, with his first 4 Pokemon, he has a phenomenal team. Especially with like a Selgor. I think a Teleon is kind of slept on as a pick here. Decidueye, it's there for like an extra water pivot. But again, I think making those 3 traits in the back will give the Delaware Dittos a really big step up in competition. So, final thoughts, Lucas?
I think that if the right coach is using this team, whether it be with the changes that we suggest or not, it will be fun to use, it will be fun to play, it will be some good matches, because those matches are not going to be like clearly decided. Because this team needs to fight to get its Ws. And this is where Pokemon really shines, in my opinion. Having those matches that really matter, that really gives you a show. This is where the fun begins, in my opinion.
With that being said, this is the first team in our category of needing trades to be viable. We have one more coach, so let's get right on to that.
Let's jump to the other side of the world with a person that probably lives closer than I do to any of you guys, being Lars. Lars L. Scissor and the Borussia Dortmund. With a, yet again, kinda interesting team, I would say. And yes, we have trades for this team as well, but who would I be to suggest trades to someone who decided that he likes that team? And he does absolutely not want to change something, because he already said that. But before we go into that point, let's look at the team at first. We have a really interesting triple steel type, triple flying type, Zygarde, Trick Room team. I think that's the only way to really put it in one sentence. But yeah, you have like those 3 flying types being Tornai, Halucha, and Skarmory, and the 3 steel types being also the Skarmory, who glues those 2 typings together, the Stack Attacker and the Bishop. Then you have this big bulky Zygarde sitting there who wants to sweep teams, who wants to break shit apart, who wants to even stall if it needs to. They can do a lot of shit. And then you have like the lower group of Pokemons on this picture being a Trick Room squad. Overall, I think it's a nice team. I just think that there's a little bit of changing that could be going on. But it's up to the coaches, obviously. If you're not gonna change anything, show us that you're better than us. Show us you know what to do with that team. CB, what do you think?
I think this team, it's very interesting just right off the bat, especially with the Bulu getting picked round 2, so prioritizing it over a lot of higher tier Pokemon in a format where we gave the coaches more points, which means that they're going to be picking more high tiers on a more consistent basis. So just right off the bat, Bulu into Skarmory into Vaporeon, really interesting combo. That being said, I think what the team lacks is immediacy. Zygarde, doesn't really have the offensive firepower that it would need on a team that's this passive. The Halucha, I think, is nice, but obviously, you want to get it into like a position where it can sword stance. You have the Sagataka, which might need to Trick Room. The Glacier is bulky, and that's probably the hardest hitter on the squad just right off the bat. But it's not a mon that you want to be relying on and depending on as that number 1 slot in that role. Another issue is probably hazards. You have the Skarmory, you have the Stakataka, you have the Bisharp. These are the only hazard users, and unless it's Skarmory, you're really going to have to be very creative in shaking up, getting rocks up and stuff like that with either the Stakataka or the Bisharp. I mean, there's some cool things you can do with like a lead Focus Sash Bisharp just because it has a lot of power. It also has like T-Wave and Metal Burst, if I'm not mistaken, or Counter. So there are a couple ways to kind of game the opponents in that sense. But hazards, I think, are going to be super important on a team that is this bulky and relies on the opponents switching around a lot. Because you do have, Bulu, which are just going to be healing the opponents with grassy terrain. You want to be kind of chipping them down a little bit. That being said, I like the bulky core in and of itself. The Zygarde, the Rotom Heat, the Vaporeon, the Globra I think is really good and synergizes really well with the grassy terrain. And then the Bulu, it's a pretty niche pick. But at 10 points, I think it's pretty solid. I would basically just shore up some of these typings that he has with the flying types and with the steel types. And they get a Pokemon that's a little bit more immediate or that can take advantage of the opponent's just hyper offense strategy. So we do have one trade in particular. This team was a little bit harder to pin down in terms of like a trade candidate, but I think this is very realistic for Lars, especially because he likes a lot of this team. So what was the one mon that we were thinking of adding on, Lucas?
It was Ditto. And why was it Ditto? Because Ditto deals with the Pokemons that you don't want to deal with. Because, yes, you can set up on this team. Probably pretty easily. But then you have the Ditto in the back, so you're gonna need to have your opponent double think about, do I set up here? Do I go for the Sword Stance? Do I maybe go for the Dragon Dance? And if you don't build your set well around the Ditto, you already know the Ditto is gonna come and haunt you. And also, what it does, the Ditto is, it gives you information. You can lead off with a Ditto. You can see the opponent's set. You maybe catch like one of those big ticket mons, those threats you don't want to see, and can use that Pokemon against your opponent, putting them in a bad scenario. Because normally, the Pokemons you're most afraid of are your own Pokemons. Because you don't really prep for them a lot of the times. Because why would you? I mean, yeah, there might be a Ditto, cool. But if he brings the Ditto and I over prep for the Ditto, it's bad, because I have nothing for his threats. But if I don't over prep for the Ditto and maybe put like a little less prep into the Pokemons, I'm going to be afraid of my own mons. And this is what I like about the Ditto pick here.
Agreed. And Ditto's only 6 points, so it really wouldn't take a lot to just swap something out. Glacier, I think, fits really, really well in this team, but if you want to get rid of like a flying type, I think that's pretty fair, just because the flying types share similar speed tiers, and I think their roles are somewhat similar, at least. So just being able to swap out a mod for Ditto, I think, gives this team a pretty competitive edge when it comes to being able to take an attacking mon and then just like flip it right back at the opponent. So that's pretty cool. With that being said, though, that is going to end this little category. There were only 2 mons that we thought really needed a couple trades just to be viable. So with that being said, let's get on into the next category.
With Lars's team being gone, we're gonna jump up the ladder to the next step, and we're gonna have the next tier. And what that tier is? It's teams that are viable, but have some slight typing problems, like multiple weaknesses, multiple recurring problems that the team shows, and did someone ever get stopped by something like that? I don't think so, but yeah, we're still here to address them, I guess. So, I'm gonna throw the ball to my buddy CB, and he's gonna start talking about team number 1 in this list being Pat Mac.
All right, up first is Pat Mac, coach of the Sacramento Sandslash. It is honestly a very interesting team that he drafted because it's, I feel like, pretty basic or pretty standard. He did get the number 1 overall pick, and so with that pick, he chose Garchomp, which I think is a very solid, phenomenal pick at number 1, without the Urshifu Single Strike, without the Dragapult. So just having Garchomp there is really solid, and then backing that up with the Kartana in the Slowbro, I think is makes for a pretty good core. You basically have one Mon that can deal with those ice types, teleport out, get into some more breaking, and I think that just makes for a really good front 3. That being said, just kind of looking down the draft, I think there's 2 main issues that stand out. One being flying types, and one being ground types. Flying types can, I think, really take advantage of the lack of hazards here, or at least the lack of rocks here in particular, just because the 2 rockers are Garchomp and Stonjourner, and you don't really want to be bringing Stonjourner to matches, and you don't really want to force Garchomp to run rocks, but unless you set the precedent and bring rocks a couple times, you're basically going to be telling flying types just to run, Life Orb, or, something maybe a little bit better, like Specs or Scarf or something like that, depending on what the matchup accounts for, like Shukaberry, if it's, I guess, like Coco, maybe not a flying type, but a Mon that can still kind of abuse those issues that this team faces. Because there's basically, no flying resist outside of the Xurkitree and Stonjourner, so, in terms of Hurricane switch-ins, you basically have the Xurkitree and then the Snorlax, which you're forcing to now be a pivot that it doesn't really want to be. And then you also just have Mons that can use Hurricane, and then they can U-turn out. So something like Torn, something like Zapdos, something, I guess, like Torn Eye, now that Lars has picked it up. And then you also have something like Coco that can maybe Dazzling Gleam and U-turn out pretty effectively. I think this team will struggle pretty handily against some of those Mons. What about the ground type, Lucas? What issues do you see there?
When I was looking at this team, I was like, okay, I'm gonna bring in my Garchomp, and I'm gonna click Earthquake. What is he gonna do?
Well, luckily he does have Garchomp, so he's not gonna have that. Or he's not gonna have that problem.
We just talked about it.
True, there is Ditto, yes.
But what would you do? You would switch into your resistances for that type, or immunities, being Moltres and Ribombee. What did both of the Pokémons get absolutely destroyed by? Or should I say, rocked by? Yes. Exactly. Rock type moves. And I think that's just a really hard weakness to have, I say. Because I know Edgequake hits a lot of things super effective, yeah. But this team gets obliterated by Edgequake. Because your switch-ins into a physical fighting type move would be the Slowbro or the Moltres. Because Ribombee doesn't want to take an Earthquake. Let's face it. Ribombee most likely doesn't want to take any hits. But your Slowbro, okay, Slowbro might take 1. Might even take 2. If it's built well. But then you're gonna get into the cycle of, okay, I need to switch out and get my regenerator popping. I need to do that and that. Yeah. But if you go into Moltres, and he predicts that, your Moltres gone. Because 1 Rock Slide and his bird is gonna be not too well, let me tell you that. But I think he has ways to play around that. He also has screens with Grimmsnarl, which we really didn't talk about, but I just don't think that it's wise to have this many ground weaknesses. And trust me, guys, I am the guy with the ground weaknesses normally. I know how it feels. I know how it feels not to be able to switch into anything.
With the Toxapex Klefki cores and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. I had them all. But yeah, I think those the 2 main problems with the team. But besides that, it should be fun. It should be nice to see the games. And obviously, it should be a banger.
All right, up next in this category, we have Bruno7, coach of the Chernobyl Dragalges. He has a very interesting team and honestly has some pretty cool ways to mitigate his typing weakness. But the main overall typing problem is also ground. He basically has Zapdos, which is, I think, going to be pigeonholed into being a very defensive Pokemon a lot of weeks. That being said, there's some cool ways to mitigate stuff, like maybe for the Lando, if that's showing up and that's running Edgequake. You can run it with a little bit of speed, maybe Charty Berry or something like that. There are ways around it. You also got things like the Gastron as well as the Maractus. And then you also have mons that can take advantage offensively. And I think that's the main thing with this team is that there is a pretty big ground weakness, but there is also a lot of ways to offensively deal with those problems. And that's one of the interesting things that these coaches can do. They can basically take a problem and they can just deal with it in their own way. In this case, we have Scarf Darn, we have Scarf Rachi, we have Scarf Gengar. They can basically outpace anything. Maybe one of those mons is banded or specs or setup or something like that. You also have the Haxors, which can just deal with pretty much any threat that they try and throw in front of it. There's also the Conch. The Conch is, I think, very slept on in this case. Just being able to trade 1-for-1. I don't think it's a mon that is going to be the leader of the offense, but it's going to be able to basically take a hit and then rock something with a Drain Punch, a CC, a Knock, a Facade, and then Mach Punch can just finish a lot of things off. So right there, you have some pretty cool things. That being said, I think another issue is maybe hazard control. You do have, like Rachi and Meltank to be able to get up rocks. You have Slurpuff for spikes, and then you also have Maractus, or you have Slurpuff for webs, and then Maractus for spikes. But at the same time, I think given the Scarfers that are showing up, like maybe something like Gengar, something like Darm, I think there's going to be some issues with opposing spikes and opposing rocks. So I think Bruno is going to have even more of a problem with the Zapdos having to potentially run Defog on it a lot of different weeks too. So right off the bat,
it could also be a Defog Conkeldurr.
It could also be Defog Conkeldurr, yes. And then you also have the Mr. Mime Galar right there as well. That being said, I think some of these mons are pigeonholed into some specific roles where on other teams they could be a little bit more free with their sets that can really play to the opponent's disadvantages. But I think based on the problems that Bruno faces, there might be an issue with being able to liberate some of these Pokemon's roles. What do you think of the team, Lucas?
I like the team. I like the overall vibe of it. And yeah, it might be like missing another maybe special breaker or something like that, but this team has wall breakers. This team has wall breakers for days. And yes, the ground weakness is big here. And yes, Zapdos is gonna be pigeonholed, like you said. But I think if you just be able to play around those weaknesses and be aware of those weaknesses, the real big point is to be aware of everything that's going on here. You can manage this team. Like if you, like you already said, trade the Conkeldurr 1-for-1, trade maybe the Manatem 1-for-1, and then have like 2 big walls cleared. Maybe the Hexors can just come in, Dragon Dance, and end it there. That's like, I think how the team is want to be played, but I don't think the team is gonna be played like that when it comes into a defensive position. Like when you need to take hits, when you need to maybe pivot into some moves, I think you're gonna have a hard time doing that. That's the only thing I really worry about the team. But besides that, I like it. And I think this will also round up team number 2 in this tier. And we could jump straight into the beautiful England, I think it is, with a man who has multiple doctor titles, I hope at least. The Doctor of Slacking, the Slacking Doctor. CB, your turn.
Alright, so up next we have the Cotswold Whimsicots, coached by the runner-up in the previous CGT event, Dr. Slacking. A really prominent coach in this league and super talented, super knowledgeable and all that. But there were a couple gripes that we had regarding the team's typings, specifically with the fighting type, as well as potentially grounded Pokemon as well, or ground Pokemon as well. Basically, There's the lando-t, which is not Sheer Force, and then you have the Hydreigon, which means that there isn't really like a conventional flying type, and then you also don't really have a conventional grass type in the Roserade. Usually you pick up like a cheap grass type just for some of those matches where ground types are a little bit more pesky, but considering that Roserade is grass and poison, it's not going to be a perfect swap into those earthquakes. That being said, I think with this ground and fighting issue, there's a couple ways to deal with it, primarily in Gothitelle, since it does have Shadow Tag. It is able to trap summons. Because opponents will be a little scared to run Scarf, you can outspeed summons with things like Hydreigon, maybe Starmie if you like run like maybe Modest Scarf or something like that. You could, I guess, run Timid Scarf as well. There's the Lando, and then there's, of course, the G-Darm, which is a very prominent Scarfer. That being said, there's going to be a lot of intersectionality with these fighting and ground problems, which I think all lie on the shoulders of one cuddly little plush right at the bottom in Beware. The 7 points.
Disagree.
You need to disagree? Well, what do you think?
Earthquake is not going to get checked by Fluffy, because it's not a contact move.
It won't. It won't. But I think the natural bulk of Beware, and then potentially running like a Chopper or something like it, or maybe like Air Balloon or something like that. I think that's going to be like one of the ways that this team is going to have to adapt to ground types. But what do you have in mind for this
Besides
team?
the facts you said there, it's going to really be like this fighting typing. The omnipresence of a fighting type being able to click a move, like a CC, have like the Gothorfell come in to take that hit, have like the Skarmy come in to take the hit. And then they're going to be able, if they have like any coverage, Sucker Punch for the Skarmy, knock off, you name it, they probably have it. And then kill like the Skarmy, kill the Gothorfell, kill the Sylveon on the second turn. It's going to be a pain dealing with that. Because you may be able to switch in your Sylveon once, then you're forced to click Wish. As the opponent orientates into their maybe Steel type, maybe whatever. And then you're on the back burner again. You need to protect, you give them one free turn, they can set up something, they can set up hazards, whatever. It's gonna slow you down. And losing this momentum is crucial here. I played against those people. And if you lose the momentum, just one turn, you're gonna be in a bad scenario. You need to play at the top of your head, and you know what to do in every scenario. And I know a lot of coaches can do that. But if they just catch you a little bit off guard, it's gonna get spicy real quick. But besides that, I like the team. It's not like my style of team where I like to have like a little bit more rough force than he has here. But overall, it's a Slacking team. We know Slacking can do plays with that team, and it's gonna be fun. So I wanna go into the last person of this tier. The beautiful Jack, aka Gravy, aka he has way too many nicknames to name all of them right now, but he has a lot of them. But you know him. God of the Vancouver Think Tanks, Jack. With a, let's say, not an interesting team. Because he has a lot of momentum, as you can see here. He has a lot of big hitter mons. He has not too well of walls, this need to be said. Because like a special wall is like not really found on this team. Maybe T-Tar, but it's a T-Tar. But beside that, you have another glaring weakness. And I always get those mixed up because I think it's completely different, but it's gonna be water and ice Pokemons that really shred this team apart. Because what are you really gonna want to switch into that? You have the T-Tar who could maybe take an ice type hit, but it's not gonna appreciate a water type hit. For your water type switch in, you have those two grass types who are not really the best Pokemons to take a grass type hit, water type hit, and you have the Quillfish. But those ones really are not the best and most reliable walls. Also the fact that two of your main walls are gonna have to wear an Eviolite to be really useful is also another big point for me. But then there's a Bust Wall, there's Sand and Excadrill, there's Aurora Veil support by the Tails. You have the big boys, the Torn and the Thundy, both in the T form. And you have the Cinderace, which is Libero, hopefully not Libero.
It's not Libero, no.
Points. Yeah, it's definitely not Libero looking at those points, even though that's quite high for Cinderace. And yeah, get the team into position, give them, like I said, one turn, and it's gonna be madness. CB, what are your thoughts on this?
I agree. I think Jack Gray is going to have to be very creative with his offense in order to get the most out of this team, because the defense is just not really here. That being said, you have a lot of creativity with offense. With the two Therian Pokemon, you got T-Tar, you got Sand for the Excadrill, and you have Aurora Veil, which I think is really nice, because usually you would find a problem with dual weather teams like this, where the drill really relies on Sand to pop off. That being said, Ninetales can basically get an Aurora Veil up, reset Sand turns, go into T-Tar and then there's 8 fresh turns of sand behind Veil, I think that's really, really solid. That being said, there are some pretty glaring weaknesses. As previously mentioned, there is water, there's ice, and there's also rock. Rock is a terrible weakness for this team as well. Excadrill is kind of the, it's the steel and the ground, of course, so you're going to have some pretty big problems with being able to take a Stone Edge, because a lot of those mons will also have EQ. They'll also potentially have a fighting move. They'll also, some might have a water move if it's like Urshifu. So you can really just mix and match what kind of coverage you want for this team. Something like a Barbarical could really pop off in the right setting, under the right context. So I think just right there, Jack's team is going to be on the back foot for a lot of this prep. Something like a Lycanroc could be really potent. A lot of mons that could really go in here. Too many to mention. That being said, I think there's enough offense to be able to mitigate these issues. The only problem, or the only limiting factor, I think, behind Jack's success is his creativity. So he's really going to have to come in and make every single team unique and fun and pretty crazy. With that being said, that is the end of this category, so let's move on into the third category.
Now we're going to get into the big boy territorium, I would call it. CB calls this category the dark horses of this draft. That are the playoff contestants. No, dark horses for playoff contestants. That's what he called it. I'm sorry for that one. That's probably the teams that don't really have any crippling weaknesses to them, but also are not like really perfectly well built. I know it sounds bad to say that, but you're gonna see what I mean when we talk about it. But yeah, we only have 2 coaches in this category. 2 persons you probably have heard of. 2 persons who really known in the draft league scene, I think. And we're gonna start off with the first one of those 2. That is Frostless. Exactly. And you can see on the screen, he has a mon that's really close to my heart, being my Volcarona. And a lot of other Pokemons. But I let CB talk about those first before I say my thoughts about that.
Alright, well, obviously the Volcarona is really, really cool, especially at 13 points. Definitely an underrated pick, but somebody had to pick it eventually in these damn Galar drafts. I think it's a really cool mon, and it is a great win con just to have in the back. That being said, there are a lot of cool things about this team outside of sand, and I think a lot of these mons can operate really well in sand and outside of sand. So good on Baddest Frostless just for making the team synergize well independent of weather. Right off the bat, you have the Celesteela, which I think can run defensive and offensive in a lot of different scenarios. It's really just what kind of mons you want to have supporting those sets. If you want to have something like a Breaker, if you want to have something like a Pivot, where Selly maybe would usually go into some of those roles. Selly basically has a lot of room to operate around this team, and it's backed by some good physical presence in the Keldeo Secret Swords. You also have the Diggersby, which is basically just a threat right off the bat. You also have some pivots like Whimsicott, Keldeo as previously mentioned, the Diggersby as well, and then you also have Celebi and Lantern. Speaking of Lantern, I like the double core between the Keldeo and Lantern. 2 water types I think is a relatively common trope in draft, but you always want to have something that can be a little less passive and then something that you could have just in the back to take those big hits. So I think those 2 work pretty well. And I also like Spiritomb just working as a bit of a pivot to some of those pesky fighting types, which might plague the 6 from the middle onto the right with the Selly all the way over to the Lantern. You obviously have Celebi there, but a lot of mons run knockoff. They also run U-turn. So, just having the Spiritomb there in the back is nice too. And then also just being able to whittle things down with sand and T-spikes I think is really cool. Could have had another rocker outside of the Gigalift and the Celebi, but I think a team like this is fine.
Doesn't Diggersby get rocks?
It gets spikes.
No, it gets spikes. It gets spikes, yeah, you're right.
What do you think about the core overall, Lucas?
I'm really a big fan of the Celestia Lantern core. That's a core I've been using since the day Celestia came out. It was the first core I ever drafted with Celestia. And I know way back in the day, people overpriced this mon as hell. I had to pay a price of Uber for this thing in a normal league to get it, and I'm happy with it. But yeah, just those 2 mons complementing each other as well is amazing, I think. Having a lot of good breakers like the Diggersby, the Keldeo, and a Drake Assault behind those 2 mons can be super painful for a team to prep with, or prep for, because you need to be able to break those walls, and there's not really a lot that can break those 2 mons without caring about the other. And then you maybe have like this lantern just wall switching around on you, because you don't really want to bring in your your ground type, because it is a water type after all. And then you maybe pivot into your, I don't know, polygons or whatever you have. And then you're gonna sit there in front of a Caldeo that's gonna fire up a Secret Sword, and you're not gonna have a great day. And I think it's just like the way the team works well with each other. But then there's like kind of this problem where I say, yeah, you have the Celebi who's your rocker, you have that maybe Gigalith who can put up rocks, but they're not the most reliable. And removing those hazards is also not the best thing, because one of your hazard removal is gonna be blocked by, well, Dark types, and the other is a Volcarona. And I don't think you want a Volcarona to be your remover. But yeah, that's like the only things I have to say about the team. I think we can move on to our next contestant.
I got one more thing to say about this team.
Yeah.
I think the team overall is really nice, but I think Badass Rostless is gonna have to get pretty creative with those Celesteela sets. Maybe not running like a defensive set like Sub Leech Seed or something like that, and then just like that's just the only defensive set you run. And then like at the same time, the only offensive set being something like the Autotomized sets. I think he's going to have to get a little unpredictable with that Celesteela, just because outside of the Drake Assault and Sand, your 2 modes of offense are just the Diggersby and then the Keldeo. One is physical, one is physical/special. You do have some mons that can also, land in some pretty heavy hits, like the Celebi, like the Dragalge potentially with like Adaptability Drake or a Sludge Wave. That being said, I think the Celesteela is going to have to be a little bit less passive in this. It can operate in a lot of different roles, but I think Badass Rostless is going to have to be very selective about the sets that Celesteela runs. So
I think it needs to be run defensive a lot of the times here, because you don't really have anything else that really wants to take hits.
I think everything has a little bit of bulk, so I disagree a little bit there. But I think it's really going to be up to the creativity of Badass Rostless to kind of, either have it really sit tight in the defensive position where there might be a little lack of offense outside of Sand, or, it might, sometimes have to just forego the defensive spot. Whereas you said, yeah, maybe there are some big hits that Celesteela could usually take where it might be forced not to.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the scenario he's going to face up in the end. But we're going to see and find out what he's going to do with that. So, with that being said, we're going to have Kurt here. Kirby, Code of the Vault Destiny, Landorus-t. You probably all of you have probably seen a video about it, and all of you have probably watched the little animation he puts in his video where he talks to his dark persona and shit like that, which is pretty cool. But which is not gonna be really cool on this team is, well, his answer to a ground type move. We need to face the fact that, yeah, maybe he should be 1 tier lower, having a ground type weakness, but he has some tracks to it at least. But it's still not gonna be a perfect time, because you don't really see a lot that wants to switch into ground type move. You don't really have a Caress type Pokemon which is hindering you. You don't really have like the perfect bulky flying type. I mean, you have a Golbat, yeah, and you have the Galar, but Galar does not have any recovery, and Golbat is a Golbat. I mean, yeah, it's bulky until it loses its Eviolite, and then it's not really going to do anything against ground type Pokemons to begin with. But you also have the Stealth, but the Stealth kind of doesn't want to be your defense switch into shit that could potentially click like any other move besides the ground type move. You kind of want this thing to be a fast rocker, you want it to be a supportive one, or you even want it to be cleaner. It can be a lot of things. But besides those weakness points, I guess, he has a phenomenal draft in my opinion, with a Sarah Orr, with a Urshifu Rapid Strike, with a Mamoswine, with a Cloaking even. Only thing is, he doesn't really have the biggest special wall breakers here. I mean, yes, Sarah Orr could be special, I agree, but you really bring a lot of physical power to the table, and then your special side is kinda lacking. I mean, yeah, there's a Tramper, there's a Cloaking, there's also a Suicune, and obviously Galar, who's a phenomenal sweeper. But you don't bring a sheer force onto the desk right away. And I think that could be kind of dangerous in a league like that. But maybe CB has other plans on this one.
Yeah, I would agree for the most part. I think something like Moltres, which is really put into a position of just being that conventional ground pivot, means that it's not going to be setting up as much. You have the Azelf, which I think it could pretty freely switch its game plan up from week to week, potentially being a special wall breaker. It obviously gets access to mass supply. It's also really fast and has some good coverage, so that could really work. Um, Another issue that I potentially see is some fighting type problems because you do have the Glow King, and that is also another special Pokemon which maybe won't be as powerful as you would want it to be on a weekly basis, just because it also has to switch into certain types, just because of the way that the draft is built. That being said, I think the firepower kind of more than makes up for it, and these issues are more nitpicks than some previous teams, I feel like. Obviously, you do have 3 immunities to ground, and then you also have, let's see, the Golbat, the Azelf, and the Slowking, and the Galar Mime, if you want to bring it just on any given week. So, you have all these mons that can deal with the weaknesses that it has. That being said, yeah, I do worry a little bit about the special wall breaking potential, like you said, Lucas, and then also some of these switch-ins a little bit. That being said, I think all the pieces are here for a pretty solid team. You have some good hazards. The physical walls, or the physical wall breakers, are phenomenal with the Mammoth Swine, with the Urshifu, with the Zeraora, potentially even bulking up for like an endgame. Especially if it's Shuka, that reduces the ground issue even more. But, I think, again, it's another one of those things where Kurt's going to have to get a little shifty when it comes to dealing with some pesky grounds, dealing with some pesky fightings maybe. So, overall, the pieces are there, but with that being said, that's going to wrap up our 2 dark horses.
Not 100% yet.
No? What do you have?
He kind of still has the resistance to ground, cause obviously he has the Suicune, the resistance to everything.
That's fair. That is fair.
But yeah, this should sum up this category. I think we should be done here. And yeah, I think we can jump into the next category. But this time, CB is going to tell you a little bit about the category.
All right, so here we are with the top 8 coaches. We have 2 categories left, and as you can see, these are the 2 dark horses for playoff contention that we have right here. But up next are the solid playoff contending teams, I think. These teams really have a little bit of everything, and their weaknesses are far and few. So we have 6 coaches up for the very solid contenders, which means that basically we have 2 coaches right at the top, which we think are not without flaw, but they have the fewest weaknesses in the team and the most synergy. So that being said, let's get on into our first coach of the solid contenders.
We're the first coach in the playoff contestants. It's gonna be Matt O'Shea, the self-named King of Draft League. Okay, looking at this team, we see a lot of things going on, and it's mostly a pretty bulky team with some heavy hitters in the back. And I do like that style. I do like having the Swampert being able to pivot around, bringing in the Toxtricity, the Latios, the Terrakion. We have the Porygon too, who does exactly the same thing, just on a different spectrum of things. Yeah, that was correct. And you have Tangrowth as a fat physical wall. And as well as that, a Scizor. You can really bounce around with this team. You can flip turn, you can U-turn, you can teleport, you can powering shot, you can volt switch. Whatever you want, you probably have it. This team has a lot of momentum going on for itself.
You can even baton pass with the Latios if you want to. So.
Oh, true. Latios has baton pass, yeah. And this is kind of what makes this team strong, in my opinion, because you always have the tools to get in the mons you want to get into. I mean, hell, even the Terrakion could be a meta mon if it has a Jackpack. Ghost Combat, a Jackpack. We've seen that before. And I think, yet they're not the best. Okay, that's Swampert. Maybe there's one of the best rockers. But you're kinda, and I did that mistake before, forcing yourself to be a supportive Scizor most of the times. Because that's one of your hazard removals. The other is Latios, Comfey, or the Articuno. And none of those Pokemon really want to be a defogger most of the times. Because Scizor, yeah, I know Scizor can be defensive. I've run a lot of defensive Scizors in my career. But there's always this part of me that had rather run like an offensive Scizor, Bandit, SD, Life Orb, whatever. But then you were like, oh yeah, I need a defogger, and you're gonna run the same old rules: U-turn, defog, bullet punch, scissor. You're gonna burn out through like 8 of your matches. It's gonna work, but it could be a better use of it. Besides that, I don't really have anything bad to say about the team. Ladios being, I think, the fastest thing on this team is kinda meh, but that's not too bad in my opinion. With things like Dragon Ball not being on the board. So CB, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with most of those points. Swampert kind of being a bit of a one-note Pokemon in this team is a little bit sad, just because it is such a cool and fun Pokemon. Just being able to get up rocks every single week and flip turn is just one of the things that Swampert can do, and the fact that it's probably just going to be doing that every single week is not the greatest. And then also hazard removal might be a bit of a problem. You know, you got Latios, Comfey, the Articuno, and the Scizor. Not mons that you want to have as your primary defoggers. So these mons in the back, maybe like Tangrowth, which would get a lot out of regen. Maybe something like Incin, which is probably going to have to run boots more of the time. Something like Porygon 2, which can also switch into a lot of moves. It means that a lot of these mons that are going to be pivoting are just going to take that much more to hazards. So I do worry about that quite a bit. And the speed tier is a little lacking. That being said, Lucas, as you said, yeah, definitely because of the mons that aren't here, it means that having some of these slower paced teams is fine. As you've seen on some of the other teams, these teams don't really get faster than like 115 in some cases. So having something at 110, it's not the worst. And then with that too, you also have Comfy, and then you also have the Scizor, obviously. That's your main bullet punch and stuff like that. So with both those mons, just being able to have access to priority 2, it kind of makes up for that a little bit. You also got quick attack Terrakion if you're that guy. And then you also have trick room options too, I guess, if you're also that guy. So some different ways to go about speed control. But overall, you know, it's a pretty solid team, and it kind of goes right in the middle of the power rankings. With that being said, let's move on to the next team.
Chocolate King. With a team I really enjoy a lot, and I'm definitely gonna be watching those videos. When you have like a Victini, a Clefairy, a Blender Manibus, you're gonna know it's my type of team. On top of that, you're gonna have a Nidoking, the Spectria. Shay's gonna be happy about this one. And the Psyduck. As well as Cobalion. This little thingy, I think it's called Ferroseed. And a Braviary. The only thing that kinda bothers me at this team is like those two birds who's really not gonna be good fighting switching, leaving, you know, the Clefable and the Nidoking as the only real fighting tracks. I mean, yes, you could switch in the Spectria into a fighting type move, but do you really want to risk the HP on your Spectria? It's not a big bulkiest of all mons. It's gonna die relatively easy. But yet again, besides maybe those little bit of a fighting weakness, which is not really a weakness here, you're gonna have a lot of momentum going on. You have the wall switch on Cobalion, you have potentially teleport on the Clef, U-turn on the Victini, wall switch on the Rotom, Manibus obviously, and the Braviary. And this kind of momentum brings you into scenarios you wanna be, and your opponent absolutely doesn't wanna be in. Because getting the Spectre maybe like a free hit after moving your opponent's normal type or ground type, not ground type, dark type with your Cobalion. Maybe just like nuking some walls with a Nidoking, and then you have the Spectre ready to clean a team. This is dangerous. Not to even speak about the Bandit Victini taking weak rate on you, because I know people hate to say it, but Victini is a problem. You're not gonna have a Bandit Victini switch on. You maybe do once, but not twice. So CB, hit it.
I think this team is super balanced for what might consist of like, how many mons is that? 8 mons, like an 8-mon team. You have pretty much everything that you need, basically from Victini up until it's 11 mons, but like basically like the top 8. I think those are the only mons that are going to be run most weeks. There's going to be maybe the occasional Regirock, the occasional Braviary at 4 points. You know, pretty decent pickup, and Ferroseed as well. That being said, I think it's essentially an 8-mon team in the sense that this mon or these mons cover each other's weaknesses, and they are all like pretty high tier, I would say. Zygarde 10, you usually see it at 9 or 10 points, so for it to be at 8 is a pretty good pickup for SK. That being said, I think the issues maybe lie in the fact that it is maybe a very centralizing team. There's a couple issues that surround these 8 relying on the Regirock or the Braviary or the Ferroseed might be a little too much. That being said, I think this is one of the placements that we could definitely say, like, Shoko King, for having what we would have in our order as the 7th place team, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think SK is going to have a very good performance, and I think he knows a lot more about this team than us. It basically has some okay fighting checks. Maybe the Clef is something that you don't really want to have relying on just taking all those fighting hits. We also have, obviously, the Victini and Nidoking, where if it's like a passive fighting hit or a fighting hit that you then outspeed next turn, those are very solid pivots. You also obviously have the immunity in the Spectre. So a lot of different ways to go about stuff. Maybe Mold Breaker Drill might be a problem, or maybe even Sandrush Drill, depending on what happens in that specific matchup versus Gray. I'm actually not even sure if he plays that matchup, but overall, I think it's a pretty solid team. And again, with all of these very high quality teams, we did kind of have to pick apart some of these problems. So these might be nitpicks, but overall, pretty solid team.
It's last season's champion, isn't it?
It is last season's champion, yes.
Is it? Was it Monte?
It was Monte, yes. Monte versus Dr. Slacken was the finals.
Okay, then it is Monte, the last season champion. On a, let's say a little bit more weird place, I think. But it is just the fact that we cannot really say anything too positive about the team or too negative. It's like a perfectly balanced mid-team that really does not show too much flaws, but not also too many tops or peaks. I can't really talk a lot about that team, I'm gonna be honest. It has a Weavile, it has a Rillaboom, it has a Latias, there are some defensive mons that really work well together, there are some offensive mons that really work well together. And after all, it's a good team. Like, we're coming into territory of teams that we cannot really pick on or say a lot about because they just work the way they do. And you're gonna look at a team and you'd be like, oh yeah, that's a team. That's a team that Mountain can use. Looks good to me. CB, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I kind of agree. Just looking at this team to begin with, we had it a little bit lower, and it wasn't really for any good reason. That being said, like, I think in this category, you're going to have a ton of talented coaches and a ton of talented teams. So just right off the bat, like, this team doesn't necessarily stand out to put it any higher. That being said, I think the main issue that I personally have, and it might be a small gripe, but it is the lack of special wall breaking right off the bat. Monte does really, really like the Shell Smash Blastoise, but obviously that takes a little bit to get Shell Smashing. The Nidoqueen might not be the best special breaker, just because, it's not the strongest, and then it also probably has to get up rocks, maybe T-Spikes on any given week. And then the other mon that's going to be prominently featured is Latias, which can definitely, like, drop Dracos, it can spam Psychics, it can Calm Mind up, but maybe not as immediate as its counterpart in Latios. So, overall, like, not bad at all. By any means, it's a really solid team, and I think Monte is going to use this super, super effectively. Just, it has a little bit of everything, and everything's very compact, I feel like. Everything has its place, but can also do a bunch of different things. So, overall, nothing really stands out, but there really aren't any big weaknesses whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree. And this one's gonna be a little bit biased, but we're gonna jump to the next coach. Me and CB's great homie JV. Part of the city, part of the team, coaching the Atlanta Victinis. What a really, really threatening team. Psychic Spam? And a Corviknight? I'm in on this one. CB, leave you the first words.
Alright, so I personally actually helped with this team as well as a couple others. And this team is, I think, very, very cool for the 15th spot in a 16-round draft. Or it wasn't 15th, it was 14th. I think it was actually the two finalists of last season, Dr. Slacking and Monte, getting those last spots. But JV being able to pick up Lele and being able to surround it with a really interesting core like this is super awesome. I personally suggested the Milo and the Vikavolt as just two slow pivots that can handle steals and can get in and out. But Jay basically picked the rest of the core which I really, really like. Drapion, I think, is super phenomenal. Corviknight is a great pivot and can be a win con in its own right. And then you also have some pretty solid hazard users in Mudsdale, in the Druddigon as well, another Pokemon that I really, really like. And then you also have, obviously, the Drapion, the Webs user in Vikavolt, and then you have the two rocks in the Lycanroc Dusk, and the Carkol, which is obviously one of the most goated Pokemon. I also like the expanding force option that Jay has in the Alakazam. Really cool, just being able to abuse the dark types potentially. Like one of them can, use a psychic move. The dark type shows up. Alakazam can hit it with a Focus Blast, a Dazzling Gleam, maybe a counter if that's what Jay has in the team, if it's like Focus Sash or something like that. And then Lele can come in later, with specs, and then it doesn't really have to think. It could just always click Psychic or something like that. So lots of cool ways to go about this team. Also like Heracross, just is like a mon that can trade 1-for-1 pretty easily, or go Moxie. So really everything has its purpose, and a lot of mons can get in, get out, and then put Lele in a really solid spot. Lucas, what do you have to say about this team?
I am a really big fan of a Druddigon. I love using that mon. Having Claire, having a rough skin, having like two other really amazing abilities in Sheer Force and Mold Breaker can be run offensively, defensively, supportively, just annoying. Like there's a lot of things that Druddigon can do, and I know I shouldn't be like talking a lot about lower picks here because they are not the star of the show, but this dragon definitely got a star. Besides that, you have a lot of funny mons to use. You have a lot of good mons to use. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Mudsdale because it's like that meh ground type in my opinion, but if you can use it, it's pretty annoying. And then you have two of the lower point Pokemons in Porygon and Carkol being Eviolite holders that can easily be knocked off. And I think that's going to be the biggest weakness of this team, knockoffs. Because you don't really have anything that personally wants to take the knockoff, maybe Corviknight, but also Corviknight likes to hold on to the item. Besides that, what do you really want to switch into knockoff? You cannot switch in Hard Milo, because the first time you probably want your Flame Orb burn. The Heracross, yeah, okay, that can be like thrown into knockoffs. Druddigon maybe as well, but this might be the little thing that's kind of holding me back on that team. But besides that, I really loved.
There might be a couple of typing issues too, like maybe Milo might be pressured into being the water switch in every single time. Same thing with maybe Ice, just because there isn't really that big of an Ice switch in either. So I would say those are probably two of Jay's main problems. But you do have the Druddigon there for water. You have Corviknight, which can take a lot of weak Ice hits. And then you also have like Lele, where if it outspeeds, can switch in and pop off a Spec Psychic or something like that. Calm Mind maybe and get going. Psychic Seed if you're that guy, or Lele I think is pretty slept on in terms of versatility. So it's really going to be up to Jay's creativity here to be able to put Lele in the right spots and claim kills from there.
We're gonna go to the just slightly a little bit worse team in my opinion. That's why it isn't the first spawn in this tier, but yeah, we're talking about coach of the Miami Man's OG Galbina, Owen. And he has a Toxapex on his team. And I'm really surprised that there's any other person, especially Owen, that would be willing to pick up Toxapex, because normally that's only like, oh yeah, Monte picked up Toxapex, yeah, that's quite normal. Maybe Lucas, yeah, but Owen? I never thought I would see Owen with a Toxapex, and I like that change of things. And behind this Toxapex, there are a lot of threatening mods. There's this Mew. We all hate Mew, because we're never gonna know what a Mew is gonna do until it clicks a button, and maybe then it's already too late. You're gonna have behind the Mew the Thundy Eye, you have the Dragonite and the Blastophorlon, which are really threatening offensive Pokemons. And then you have like a Crocodile, a Klefki, who can be supportive, who can be a little bit more productive Pokemon on the team. As well, to finish off the Regenerated Core with our Dino. And then you have these two niche Pokemon, I say, in Shuckle and Appleton, which are fun to use, but are not the best Pokemons. And I know I'm gonna get hate from Kelly for saying Appleton isn't a good Pokemon, but we gotta face the fact that it really isn't the best Pokemon. And yeah, I think this is a really well balanced team. It has a lot of things. It has a lot of speed control going on for it. Prankster T-Waves and Tailwind can really work here. You have Klefki with a lot of hazard stacking. You have a lot of you can set up reflex and shit. The only thing that once again is kind of meh on this team is the hazard removal, being only on the Klefki and the Thundy. Once again, and Mew, I think.
There's also the Dragonite, but you really don't want that to be the defogger in this case.
Yeah, I think so as well. I don't think Dragonite is gonna be a defogger.
You also don't want Mew to be the defogger either, but...
yeah, but that's like the really biggest problem. You can kind of easily hazard stack this team, because most of the time both of his defoggers are gonna get blocked by Dark type, which is kind of awkward. But besides that, I really like it. And who needs hazard removal? I don't bring hazard removal at 90% of my games. Maybe that's why I got last season, but who knows? We're gonna find out as Owen uses this team. But CB, what do you think?
Well, I think this team hinges the most on the creativity. Like, I think it's kind of a cop-out for me to say, like, oh, you know, the performance of this team is going to be based on the creativity. And I've said that for a couple of different coaches. I think this is the team that is affected the most by one Pokemon, and that is obviously Mew. Being able to fit into every single role is going to be insane. So Owen cannot just bring, like, a stall breaker Mew, or, like, something that... it's just like sheer defense or something like that. I think Owen's going to have to shake it up every single week, bring something that really counters the opponent, and I think the team building starts with that Mew set. So I think he has a really good team backing the Mew. It's just about being able to get set up, maybe like it's a Dragon Dance or a Nasty Plot or a Cosmic Power or something like that. Just being able to get Mew into those positions where it can be the win con. That being said, you have some other really big win cons in maybe like a Moxie Crook 1 week. You got the Lucario, which can obviously break for a lot of teams, and maybe it's not like the Mon that cleans up, but, you know, breaking is still a win con in some sense, you know, just to be able to get those cleaners into the right spot. Another cleaner, speaking of, is the Blacephalon. Just being able to, you know, run Scarf. I think that's pretty crazy. Then you obviously have DD and Nasty Plot on the Dragonite and the Thunder, respectively. And Dragonite, I think, is really cool here, being able to be a nice pair to the Toxapex. It's maybe not as good as it is on Ladder, but it's still, you know, really solid option, being able to run defensive sets and offensive sets. One issue that I maybe have with this team is just the fact that because of so many of the Mons, bulk and passivity, there might be an issue with some Mons right off the bat being able to get up like an SD or a Nasty Plot or something like that and force the Miami Ments into a very defensive spot for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
That's kind of, again, maybe something that lies on the creativity of the team. But I think a lot of the pieces are there. Honestly, this team was lower initially, and I had to convince a good number of people in order to bump this team up. So I'm really interested to see how this goes. That being said, you know, there are a couple weaknesses, but overall, pretty damn solid.
Coming from toxic sea creatures to toxic persons. Just kidding at that point, but we have a really nice person here, being the head commissioner of the CGT, being Addison, Aquarius, and Chicago's Drankstep. And, okay, hear me out. There's a reason why this team is here. Not because we got bribed or because she threatened us to kick us out if we don't put her here. No. It's because of the fact that she had the quotation mark balls to put in a Tapu Fini and a Sumaril. Why? I don't know. We're gonna need to ask CB and talk to him because he helped building the team.
Yes, I did help building the team. And basically, as you can see, Aegislash got picked up, and Addison was looking at these different waters and these different fairies, and I really had a good time using the Azumarill and EWT. And actually, Addison wanted me to name it after herself, because I was naming all the Mons after Prep City people, so I did. And so I figured, why not just put Azu on a team like this? It's a really good breaker, it's a really good revenger, it's really good at handling a lot of different things, especially in draft, where you can really adjust its HP, speed, defenses, and make a pretty complex EV spread. I think this is a Mon that people really overlook, especially at only 12 points. So I think being able to pair it with Aegislash and being able to pair it with Finny, it's really weird. That being said, I think it's actually really, really neat. There's also a lot of Mons at some pretty interesting speed tiers. You got Crobat at that base 130. It's not going to show up every single week, but it's going to be pretty solid overall. Just being able to Super Fang, U-turn, be kind of a bulky menace, a bulky nuisance. And then you have 3 Mons hovering around that 105 speed tier, which can kind of shore up that big gap. Because there's always going to be something that you're going to want to scarf out of those 3, or something that's going to be able to get a speed boost out of those 3. So overall, pretty interesting team, some good versatility, maybe not the most balanced. There might be some times where you really have to bring the Stunfisk when you don't want to, or like a weird Zarut set that might not fit, but you need an electric resist or something like that. Overall, though, I think it has a little bit of everything. Maybe Nihila goes forced to bring rocks, bring T-Spikes more than it wants to, and the T-Spikes are kind of hampered by the Misty Terrain, if any, so Addison's going to have to play around that a little bit. But overall, I think it's got pretty much everything you need. It's kind of like a neo-conventional Addison team in the sense that it's got, I feel like, a bunch of weird mons that just work. They synergize pretty well, and, a lot of different 6 can come in any single week. So, Lucas, do you have any final thoughts on this team?
I don't think there's much that I can add on this team, because it's like one of the teams you need to see in motion to really talk about it. It's kind of a weird team, like you already said. There are some pieces that just don't look to work for me, but there's a reason it's up here. There's a reason we put it here. It's just that I want to get proof of that right now, and I will need to wait and see. But it just lacks this little bit of, I guess, offensive pressure for me.
That's fair. That's actually pretty damn fair. Like, Azu's going to have to show up a lot. Aegislash might not be as passive as you want it to be. And some of those Scarfers might not hit as hard as you want them to hit either. So I think that is probably the thing that's keeping it from being at that upper echelon of teams. And by upper echelon, I mean top 2. But overall, still pretty solid placement. Definitely a team that is worthy of playoff contention. So with that being said, that is going to end the category, and we have 2 more teams remaining. All right, and with that being said, that is the biggest tier that we just went over, the playoff contenders with basically 6 coaches that might not all make it to playoffs, but I think their teams and their drafting abilities were all shown to be above average in this draft. So good shouts to all of those 6 coaches that were in the previous category. That being said, we have 1 category left, and this is the perfectly balanced tier, as all teams should be. There are 2 coaches left, 2, as you can tell, non-Americans. We got some pretty interesting draft styles here, but they synergize super, super well, and they're going to make for some really, really fun watches for these matches.
At number 2, we have the Finnish Superstar Draft League player Elias, aka Websis, coach of the Helsinki High Dragons. And as you should know, Webs is a phenomenal player. There's barely to none who's going up with him when it comes to skill, knowledge, and basically just playing the fucking game. And yeah, as you can see on your screens right now, this is the madness of the team he managed to draft up for the season. Not only has he the king of all you himself, lando-t, as probably, I don't know his pick in this draft, but I think it wasn't like one of the
it was like 6th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and getting Lando at that point was pretty good, especially with things like Dragapult and Lando's not being around. And then he picked up a Mon. He said he wanted to use that for the last time he had, because we don't know if it's going to be in the new game. But he picked up Necrozma because he never was able to use Necrozma during this 4 years of playing draft.
I find that a little troublesome because, like, Necrozma was always around, like, round 2. But I guess he really, really wanted it. And I mean, to be honest, it doesn't seem like he wanted another lease just because you could usually scoop it up. But, hey, it's there.
Yeah, it's there. He wanted to use it. I can understand it. I know how it is to want to use a Mon and drafting it just when it's absolutely not the time to draft a Mon, but I think it works here. He has those double sack types with a Metacross, but Metacross kind of takes a completely different role on this team than Necrozma, but then what role is Necrozma really taking? It's just like a little bit worse of a Mew that can do a lot of shit, being like a supporter set, an offensive set, just a wall breaker. There's a lot of things that it can do. And then he just took like two super bulky Assault West loving mons, being Primarina, Raikou. Said this is gonna be my defensive backbone with Lando. And then he just threw threats over threats on his fucking team. And it's a pain to face in my opinion. I don't want to prep against this. Hell, I rather just forfeit that week. But CB, what do you think about this madness?
I recall, I think I helped a little bit with this team, particularly with some of the mid-tier picks with like Talonflame and Scrafty. And I think I felt like I had to convince Vepsis to pick up that tandem, even though he picks it up so often. Like he even had it for last CGT. But I think that core right there is like really nice just as a mid-tier core. Like there's nothing that really handles both. And you're already trying to obviously deal with the Primarina, the Raikou, the Necrozma, and the Landorus, basically from top to bottom in terms of quality there. Like, there are a lot of threats that you have to handle, and then also having like such a balanced mid-tier core, I think is really, really cool. You got some hazards in the Weezing, where, you know, maybe you want the Metagross and the Necrozma to do different things, or maybe one of them isn't even showing up to the game. So having a T-Spike setter is really, really nice here, especially for a team that can operate in a very bulky manner. And then also like Goodra, just kind of being able to take a lot of pretty strong special hits where there's not really a big defensive or especially defensive wall on this team. Maybe like the Necrozma one time, maybe like AV Prime or Raikou. But I think Goodra just being there really shores everything up. There's also some good defog options with the Talonflame. You know, Lando's also there, but obviously you have rapid spinning in the Serena too. So I think the speed tiers are all pretty good. You know, hitting 115 in a league like this is totally okay. And then also just tons of balance. Like, really checks all the boxes.
Yeah, I agree. But I think we shouldn't stay here for too long. We should give the crown to the man who's in the first position. Another, this time Swedish person, being one of the bigger names you hear out here, has won a lot of the big ticket leagues. He's been around for, I think, a really, really long time. The man, the myth, the legend, Sven. And his Uppsala Umbreons? I'm never gonna be able to pronounce the name correctly, I feel like. But you can look at his team and you already can tell why we put him here. There seems to be nothing that is not working in place on this team. You have the Ferrothorn, you have the Tapu Koko, you have the Glapdos. There's an Umbreon, the mascot pick, you're gonna respect that as well. And it just works this perfectly around. Yeah, his two main walls are weak to fighting type moves. Yeah, okay. But there are Pokemon that easily can check those fighting type moves. The Koko, any Sivali form that's not weak to fighting. Choose one, I don't care. You're gonna have the Drifblim that's gonna abuse the electric terrain like no other Pokemon. There are a lot of things that just like work together on this team that I really love. And then once the hard battles are over, the walls are broken, you have this Cloyster sitting there. And you know it's gonna kick Shred Smash, and you're gonna have a bad fucking day. So yeah. CB, what are your professional opinions on this team?
My professional opinion is that I think this team's really, really cool. I think Vepsis, you know, drafted a really solid, balanced team with like not a lot of weaknesses. But I think Sven drafted a balanced team that just has a ton of different synergies about it that are, I would say, more apparent. Being able to get in electric terrain for the Drifblim is pretty cool. But then you also have like a lot of fighting weaknesses or a lot of fighting resistances for the Koko or with the Koko, the Gyapdos, the Uxie, the Salazzle. You can bring in Cloyster. You know, you have like a potential Rain Core in the Ferrothorn, the Seismitoad, and the Tapu Koko as well. So like a lot of options there. You have Silvally that can fit into a lot of different roles. You know, it doesn't have to be a breaker, it doesn't have to be a wall, because you already have all of that there. Really cool options. I think basically this team has a little bit of everything, or at least enough of everything, to garner this spot, especially in a league with so many talented coaches and so many talented drafts as a result. I think this team does kind of set the bar for building, and now it has to set the bar for playing. So we'll see, if it can perform week 1 and prove us right. But overall, I think very solid team. Has breakers, cleaners, setup options, clerics. Everything kind of covers for itself, and it does it in a very apparent manner. So I think that's a really good job to Sven for making this team. But that's going to be it for the rankings. Unless, Lucas, you have anything else to say?
I do have nothing to say, cause I know I gotta edit this now. And I think we're good here. We're at like a good 1.5 hour mark. I hope you guys enjoyed this beautiful video. Show the coach some love. Show the CGT YouTube channel some love. And maybe we're gonna see us here again soonish. Who knows? But with that being said, have a good one, guys.
Take it easy.
Peace from my side. CB, your last words.
It's been good. Support CGT, and here's to a very exciting close to the Galar region.